This past year, I had one of the most memorable hunts of my life, and it ended maybe like you wouldn't expect. I wasn't sitting behind a big buck. For me, I love shooting, chasing big bucks, but more than that, I love the strategy behind it, learning as much information as I can about them, and I love seeing the people around me enjoy hunting and get a chance to big buck themselves. This year, my ultimate goal was to see my wife Allie shoot her very first buck. This is a story of a buck that we call the 6x5. Here in Minnesota, this buck first showed up on our radar in 2019 as a 3.5-year-old. He was a pretty regular buck on our farm and super recognizable. He had a really nice frame, main frame 9-pointer, kind of started with some swooping beams, good tine length, but just a deer that wasn't reached that full maturity yet, and a deer that we knew in a few years could have some real potential. Moving into the 2020 season, we were really hoping to see that deer and what he was going to turn into as a 4-year-old. He was now a 10-pointer. He had thrown a G4 on the one side. Really that same frame, gorgeous deer. He had long tines, kind of those sweeping beams, and a really nice buck that we weren't really sure if he was going to be on the hit list though or not. This is one of those deer that we know he's 4 years old, so he's reaching that age of maturity, but seeing what his frame looks like and understanding the area, this deer had a lot of potential if we could maybe let him go for one more year. We sat down as a group and I think we all kind of came to a consensus at the beginning of the year that let's let this buck go one more year. Let's let him get to 5.5 and see what he does. This piece of property that we're hunting here in Minnesota is really pretty cool. It's set up, there's a group of us that go in and put in a bunch of work and manage this ground, and we really try to work together when we approach this property each year. Throughout that 2020 season, we got several pictures of this deer. He had really made this property home, and his core range was right there. From summer all the way through the season, we got a lot of pictures of him, and I actually had an encounter with him in mid-October. It's really cool to see this buck in the daylight up on his feet, and like we confirmed, beautiful looking deer. I knew that wasn't a deer that was on the hit list I wanted to shoot, but I remember thinking, wow, what a great scenario that would have been. The does moved away, understanding the time of year, I think I could have piqued that deer's interest, couple grunts on the extinguisher, and he probably would have closed the distance. As the night goes on, another little buck comes out, more deer activity, and sure enough, I look up, here comes that 4-year-old 10-pointer. All I was interested in doing is filming him. So he comes out, perfect, beautiful footage, awesome encounter, walks out 15 yards broadside, kind of puts on a show in front of me, and I sat there and I enjoyed that moment. How cool was that to see a deer, 4 years old, just out there doing his thing, and I had excitement for the future to come because this is one of those bucks that you just know has really great potential. So as the 2020 season progresses, that deer sticks around. He makes it through the gun season and he ends up wintering there. One of the people that also is in on this property with me ended up picking up his sheds. Really cool, just another piece of the puzzle. We got to take a look and really examine what he was. Beautiful 4-year-old deer, really nice rack, and again, just another piece of the puzzle moving into 2021. So heading into the 2021 season, we were obviously excited to see what this deer was going to do at 5.5 years old. But there were some substantial changes that were happening to the property. The CRP field that I hunted over the year before came out of CRP, so it was going to be crops this year. This is the first time that we've ever seen it as ag land. It's always been CRP. So we really had to take a step back and try to re-understand how the deer were going to use this once it was ag land. The farmer came in, he planted corn, and as they sometimes do, planted rows all the way up tight to the woods. So what does that mean? It took away our easy, quiet access along the field edges to get to some of these spots that were back in there. My good friend Lance came up with the idea of renting a brush hog and going out there and mowing down brush along the edge of the cornfield. What that did is it created just a trail big enough for us to slip in and out and still be quiet, undetected. One of the things that we noticed right away as the corn got tall in those summer months, we started running our Reveal Churro cameras, is that these bucks, they were actually using this corn to bed in. And they started using these edges, especially where Lance had gone in there and mowed, as travel corridors back and forth. All in all, what we found is that corn really helped us out. You know, it really limited the places that deer could access that field or cross that field, and it really put the advantage in our favor as bow hunters because they could only come out in certain spots. It wasn't going to be a scenario, at least early in the year, where you could see a deer way off. You were going to get in the spot and a deer was going to come out and walk that corn edge and probably be within bow range. Right away, early summer, sure enough, guess who's back? It's that 10-pointer from the year before, and now he's turned into a 6x5 at 5.5 years old. Now, after getting some pictures from the reveals and looking at some of the videos, this buck is impressive. He's really made that jump from 4 to 5 years old, and now one of those bucks that you say, yep, he's one that we want to target. He's reached that level of maturity, and just a beautiful buck that we're going to set our sights on for this year. This deer, he is super regular. He's made a home here, and there's other good deer that are in this same area. And there's a really mature 5.5-year-old 8-pointer, both bucks that are at the top of the hit list. As we went through the summer and as we're strategizing and starting to gather all this intel and make a plan on how to harvest this buck this year, it wasn't really me I was thinking about. In the back of my mind, I'm thinking, wow, this is a perfect scenario for Allie. This field is now a standing cornfield. Again, the travel routes of these deer are limited. So I know that we already have a few strategic stand placements that are set up along the edge of this field. And with her being more of a new bow hunter, what this cornfield does is it really funnels these deer down. They're gonna be walking along the edge. I know that if she gets a shot opportunity at a deer, it's probably gonna be within that 20-yard mark. As the season kicks in, it's not something where we want to go out and just hunt every day because we're getting pictures or videos of these deer. You know, we have to be really careful on how we approach it. It's a delicate area. These deer are in there a lot. So early season, they're not bedding very far because they're not moving very far. Some of them are bedding in the corn, getting up, not moving very far. Others are bedded just off the cornfield, coming there to feed and going right back. The last thing that you want to do is go in and blow your deer out because a mature buck, a buck that's 5.5 years old or 6.5 years old, you bump them once, you don't know if you're ever going to get a shot at him again. So we were trying to pick the right window to go in and get after this buck. The other thing that gets thrown into the equation is that my wife, she's taking care of our 2 boys at home. So she doesn't have a lot of time to get out and get in the woods. I'm out filming and doing other things too, busy with work. So for those 2 things to match up, we really have to pick the right windows and be strategic on how and when we go in there. So the strategy here was more of that low impact approach. It was not push it too hard, not bump the deer, wait for an evening when the advantage is to us. Deer are bedded in the corn or they're bedded off the edges. We can slip in there along a trail that we put in earlier, quiet, undetected, get in there and wait for the deer to come out to us. Well, October 18th, that day finally came. The perfect window seemed like it was lining up. You know, we had a cold front that was going to push through in the next day or so. It was high pressure, we had sun, and the wind was out of the southeast. Now, a southeast wind is crucial here because what it does from our stand location is it pushes our wind directly out over that standing corn. we were headed out to the stand together with high hopes of maybe seeing the 6x5.
It's October 18th, and we got some daylight photos of the big 6x5. So we worked some magic, got my lucky charm Bryan in the tree with me, so we're hoping to get the big guy down tonight.
Probably an hour and a half before dark, deer started to move to our west. A few does came out and they worked their way right down the corn edge, right to us, and started feeding out in the corn in front of us. And actually where they were feeding was directly downwind from us. So they're out in the standing corn in front of us, southeast wind blowing right at them, and they have no idea we're there. So that tells me we're passing the test. Not long after that, I hear some ruckus down to my west again, down where those does came from. I look and I see another deer. Sure enough, guess who it is? It's the 6x5. Well, that feeling of overwhelming excitement turns into a little bit of feeling of unknown. Allie and I are kind of looking at each other, and she's kind of looking at me, trying to understand what I think of the whole situation, and I know immediately that the shot's back. The right thing to do is to leave that deer go and slip out of there undetected, and if we don't bump him, we leave him go, there's a good chance we're gonna find that buck.
The big 6x5 just came in. He was standing directly underneath us. Downwind. I see a few spots of blood. Kind of in the direction that the deer went after I shot. So that's good.
We're gonna back out. This arrow is straight cuts. So we're gonna back out. Not ideal. We gotta let him lay overnight. We'll be back in the morning. See. Okay, let's go.
We just slipped out of there. We actually used that back door that I had marked earlier through the standing corn on my Onyx app. Slipped out of there in a completely different direction than that deer went back to analyze the situation. So after a sleepless night, we headed in there the next day and started to track. You know, there wasn't a lot of blood, but we knew the general direction that this deer went, and he dropped off over this big hill and went down into this creek bottom. So we were about 130 yards in the woods, and as I'm going along this creek bottom, I come around the log. Sure enough, there he lays.
You see him? Right up there? Should we go check him out?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh my gosh! That's amazing!
Ooh, it's blood.
Yeah! Mommy's first deer!
Look,
Can you believe that? Are you so excited?
Congratulations, babe. Look at that buck.
The giant.
Bear.
Incredible.
Papa.
Yeah, buck.
What do you think, buddy? I've had the opportunity to recover lots of deer in my life, ones that I've shot and ones that other people have shot. And this one by far was the most memorable of my life. You know, Allie's first buck, all the hunting that she's done before this, and everything that she does on a daily basis to take care of our family and our boys, and to see her, you know, get out there and reap the rewards, especially on a deer of this caliber, our boys being there, man, it was the most special moment of my hunting career. Something clicks in my brain and I think back to the encounter that I had with that same buck. And at that moment I realized that I had had an encounter the year before with that buck to the exact day that she shot him this year. So October 18th, 2020, I had the encounter. October 18th, 2021, she shot that deer out of the exact same stand. And you know, at that moment, not that it needed any more to add or end the story, but at that moment it was so cool to just see that that was made to be. There were several keys that made this hunt successful, and that first one is really history and intel. Those reveal cell cameras, they gave us all the information we needed. They gave us all that intel from afar, allowing us to have that low impact strategy. And those reveal cameras allowed us to do just that. The next key to the hunt was access. Access played a huge role in being successful because it allowed us to get in and out undetected. Not only was it creating the access, taking that brush hog mower in there, creating the path for us to get in there undetected, but it was also understanding how to access and when to access. So not going in there in the morning, not going in there all the time and blowing these deer out before we had a legitimate chance at killing them. The third key, and maybe the most important key to this entire hunt, was scent control. If we didn't have good scent control, almost perfect scent control, this hunt never would have happened. We had to put our foot traffic on the same trails that the deer were using. And then two, we had a 5.5-year-old buck, a mature 6x5 at 8 yards with his head up in the air looking at us directly downwind. And I know that our wind was blowing right at him by that phased wind floater. If our scent control wasn't perfect, that deer would have had us and we never would have got a shot opportunity.